Since I started talking about Light and Lisa, what the director does to communicate how people feel about each other, let's also talk for a second about the way characters are framed on screen. Um, Again, it's always worth sort of pausing the movie to look at why. So I give it the movie has an incredibly simple example, which is that when Jeff and Lisa are dealing with the cop, there's quite a few scenes where they show the cop and then they show Jeff and Lisa, and they show the cop and then they show Jeff and Lisa. And even if Lisa's not talking, she's in the frame with Jeff. Or even if Jeff's not talking, he's in the frame with Lisa a lot of the time. Why? Because it communicates sides. It tells you who's with who, who's standing by, not standing by who literally, but also I believe in this person, I trust them. Um, it's possible to sort of have, you can imagine that the scene where the cop comes over to talk to Jeffries and Lisa about Thorwald, you can imagine just putting the camera kind of back where all three of them are visible, and they just have like a play, where in a play you would just have all three characters on stage and they would talk to each other. Now, granted, they would be placed, there might be one might be standing closer to another one, but in a movie, what you can do is you can choose who to show on camera at any given time and who not to show. And so one of the things Hitchcock does in that scene is he has a lot of shots of the cop alone, and then Lisa and Jeffrey together. The cop alone, and then Lisa and Jeffrey together. And it's just a way of showing sort of who's aligned with who, who's affiliated with who. Lisa and Jeff are a team, and the cop is disagreeing with him. And so instead of just having a shot of all three of them together, which he does sometimes, he often has shots of Lisa and Jeff together, and then a reaction shot from the cop where he says something. Not a reaction shot, but like he has his bit. He tends to be framed alone, meaning he's in the movie frame by himself, and Lisa and Jeff are framed together because they're a team. When Lisa and Jeff are opposed to each other, they tend to be shown. You show him and you show her. Sometimes something physical will even be between them, like the window is divided into sections behind them. So you'll see there'll be like almost like a bar. It's just the bar of the window, and it's not in front of them. It's not like they can't see through it. It's behind them. But for me, looking at the screen, what I see is a person and a line and another person. And that's like for the scene, for example, when they're sort of bickering about their relationship. Um, Hitchcock does this in a more dramatic way throughout the movie. Because when I talk about the way people are framed, what I mean is that imagine the movie screen like a picture frame, and where are people placed in that frame and why. But Hitchcock does something, this movie allows Hitchcock to do something really interesting. Because it's about looking out of a window at other people's windows, what you often get in the movie is characters who are framed by their window. And this creates interesting things. So, for example, there's a moment in the film when Miss Lonely Hearts her life is being saved. And she's standing at the window listening to this music, and directly above her, Lisa is standing in Thorwald's apartment saying, "Oh my God, I'm in trouble. I'm about to get caught." Um, and it's a way of linking the two. Neither of them know that. Weirdly, Jeffries and us are the ones that notice this. But it's a way of linking or connecting the two characters because of where they're placed in their sort of window frames. Um, okay. And there's a lot of stuff like that happening in the movie where characters are framed or placed in different ways. Thorwald and his wife, for example, you see Thorwald in the living room window, and then you see the wife in the bedroom window, and they're not getting along. They're literally not in the same frame. Um, it's a way of communicating sort of the break in that relationship. They're not together in the frame, I mean the frame of the windows. Which one of the crucial things that I think really attracts Hitchcock to this movie, and we'll talk more about this when we get to theme, is that the shape of the window is extremely similar to the shape of a movie theater screen, and so he can do effects like that. Okay, cool. This is going pretty good. All right. See, what else do I want to do? We're gonna get to theme in a second, and that's when we're gonna get to all the really juicy stuff. But I want to go through some of the more sort of technical themes. All right, cool. More technical things, I should say. Okay, cool. We're doing good. I think I hit all those things. All right, cool. Got a couple of minutes left here. All right, let's talk about character for a second. One of the things we need movies to do is to connect us to characters. In order to do that, they got to tell us about characters. A bad movie will just have someone tell you out loud everything you need to know about the character. There's actually a moment like this in the movie in Hitchcock's movie that I don't. It's a moment that I don't love. It's a little tiny. You wouldn't care about it. I'm sure you didn't even notice it. But the cop is talking to Jeffries, and he says something like, "Man, why is it that what did I do to get stuck with you flying that plane in the war? I saved your life, and that's how you got that great job that you got." That tells us something about Jeffries, right? That first of all, he used to be in the war. That's a useful thing to know, that he served in World War II. That's how he knows the cop, but that's also how he got his start as a photographer. He was doing, like, taking pictures in a war is an extremely dangerous thing to be doing. But that's also why he can call the cop like a buddy buddy kind of relationship, and he's not making an official 911 call; he's just having his friend come over. But it's a kind of clunky way to find out about it. Why is it clunky? Because the cop says to Jeffries something they both already know. He's like, "Man, that's so, I can't believe when we were in the war together, and I flew you around everywhere, and that got you your job that you got today as a photographer, and we did dangerous stuff together in a war, and we were stuck in that little boat." Um, and it's very wise. I learn a lot from that experience of listening to them talk to each other. But what's not so good is that since they both already know this information, it seems strange that they would say it out loud. I mean, it is possible sometimes when you're fighting with somebody that you might remind them of something that you both know is obviously already true, but it's not the very best way to communicate information to the audience, because it feels like you're communicating it to me. The better way to do it is trust me to be smart enough to pick up on some little details on my own. Because it feels like a human being wouldn't how often when you're with your friends do you summarize your relationship with them? You don't need to. They know what your relationship is. You know what your relationship is. The only reason you would summarize it is for somebody else who's never met you guys before. Well, that's what the cop does in that scene, is he sort of summarizes the relationship between him and Jeff for me, the audience. That's not the best way to do it. Because then I feel like they're talking to me, and that kind of breaks the magic spell of the movie a little bit. So there's other ways to communicate information about character. Some of this is you can learn a lot about a character from costumes. You can learn there's all kinds of different details that will tell you about characters. In Rear Window, the thing about characters, the really big piece of communication about characters comes from all the neighbors. And this is one of my favorite things about Rear Window, is that all of the neighbors reflect our character in some way. So let's go through some examples. The piano player is a frustrated artist because he wants to be a great piano composer and he's having a hard time. That's a lot like Jeff, who is a photographer, a different kind of artist, who is also unable to work right now for different reasons, but it still reflects the situation. Thorwald and his wife, they don't get along. That's one of the big things Jeff's dealing with. Him and Lisa aren't getting along. And Thorwald and his wife are married, and he feels like if he gets married, he's going to have this nag of a wife, and they're not going to it's going to be a bickering, terrible. He's worried if he marries Lisa, they're going to have a bickering, terrible relationship where he's trapped at home and he doesn't want to be there, and they fight. Well, that's kind of what's happening to Thorwald across the way, right? Is that Thorwald is bickering with his wife, just like Jeff is worried about Jeff. There's pressure on Jeff to get married in this movie. I keep calling him Jeff because that's Jeffries. Jeff is the name of a character in Blue Velvet, and we'll get to that. He's very similar, which is why I keep slipping up on him. Jeffries is under a lot of pressure to get married in this movie, and he's worried. He's thinking about it. He's worried about it. And so Thorwald's marriage problems reflect his own concerns about getting married. But of course, the other thing he's worried about is if him and Lisa break up, he's going to be all alone. Right? He'll be by himself in that apartment, and he'll be very, very lonely. Just like Miss Lonely Hearts. He's worried that if he marries Lisa, he's going to be trapped in a marriage, just like Thorwald. And he's worried that if he breaks up with Lisa, he's going to be lonely and sad, just like Miss Lonely Hearts. And he's having problems with his career, with his art, just like the piano player across the street. And there's another one that's more complicated and interesting, but the newlyweds across the way. They're having a ton of sex, and the guy can't keep up with the woman. That's a problem that he's having, because him and Lisa's romantic relationship is messed up by the fact that he has broken bones. Well, I'm going to talk more about that, but I think it's crucially important, and I'll talk more about it. But Jeff and Lisa can't have sex because of his injuries. so he can't sort of sexually satisfy her. That's exactly what's happening with a newlywed couple across the way, where the woman wants to have sex all the time and the man is too exhausted leaning out of the window and she calls him back. He can't keep up with her. All right, I'll see you in the next video.